Hello and welcome back. And yes, I'm aware I made some mistakes in the past, and some of the criticism was definitely warranted. I've learned a lot from all your guys' feedback, so thank you. So today we're going to dive into what aiming looks like from actual good players in this game, and see if we can spot the difference between good aim and an aimbot going a bit haywire. So yeah, I did some digging, and we're going to go through what it looks like. This is cheating in Dark and Darker, and these are things you need to know. Firstly, when a hit is delivered, there is usually perfect tracking immediately before or after the hit. And this is a result of the aim key or aim lock, whatever function they are using to track players, locking in. You can see it right here, reversing on this clip, 3 or 4 frames of perfect tracking. That's going to be important for later. Now, also, the snaps. Snaps occur because the program can't quite catch up to player movement. Like in this example, player moving left to right, and a snap is delivered on a set point. So let's see if we can find just somewhere out there, there may be someone using stuff like this. Let's see if we can find examples of this happening with a perfect snap and tracking all in one. And in this example, it's quite clear. You get a throw being initiated, player movement being taken into account, so the program's trying to adjust for it. And the last few frame adjustments are not always smooth because it has to make up ground, which results in a snap to the nape with a few frames of perfect tracking, a snap off, which then becomes a bit more soft because no hit is being initiated. Now, these instances are meant to be well hidden by design, but we're going to compare this to regular players' aim and see if we can complicate this even further. In this example, we have some last second hesitations from left to right, and we'll see if the aim tracking can adjust. We have a throw being initiated. I'm assuming the aim lock key is initiated and it's pulling to the left exactly when the player is pulling to the left. Not only that, it's beginning to predict for the player getting further away. And then this Franny is locking into a nice, once again, nape of the neck point, tracking the player side to side. Unfortunately, with projectiles and player movement, they are not always perfectly accurate. It will do everything in its power to get that lock on and try to predict, but the programs are not perfect. Thus, projectiles become a problem and projectile speed becomes a problem. In melee combat, it's much more egregious, which you get the crazy snaps, really rapid transitions from one swing to the next to try to catch up to the weapon, which we will look at. These are some good examples, but we're going to complicate it even a little more and see if it will also pull up and down vertically when a player makes a sudden change in movement. And you didn't quite notice it there, but you will see it. This Warlock's doing everything he can to get through that door and away. A throw is initiated. The player throwing the weapon is actually dropping through the air, lands flat on the box, but right here is the important moment. Throw is about to happen, so it needs to move quickly. So a sharp readjustment occurs upwards, and then the interesting moment occurs when the wizard crouches and it readjusts to hit that nape region perfectly. It's like at the point where it needs to deliver that Franny, and the adjustments start happening more rapidly based on the player movement. By design, it's supposed to look very smooth, but there are situations with player movement and last minute changes that can really impact how it looks visually when you go frame by frame. But once again, we have a point where it's locked in, and another wrinkle to this whole thing can be hitboxes. So, hitboxes become hugely important, especially if, let's say, for example, a friendly player's hitbox becomes activated when you are swinging. So let's slow this one down. This one's going to take a little bit, but just to be clear, and so you guys are on the same page here, this is what a hitbox looks like for one of these programs. Take note, it actually extends beyond the hands of the player. When using thrusting weapons like spear or anything else, the hitbox actually grows a bit larger and can become a problem. So in this example, we have a fighter being chased. I'm assuming the lock key has been pressed, which enables some decent tracking. And once a swing is initiated, remember, the swing on a double axe, especially the overhead swing, which we're about to see, is very long and drawn out. So this player has a lot of time to do unpredictable things, which cause problems when it comes to smoothing out this frame by frame, perfectly timed hit. So, swing is initiated, but this fighter is now trapped in here. He has nowhere to go. It's trying to lock on and deliver a hit to the nape region. We've established that. Let's just see where this hit ends up. Player's moving right to left now, causing all kinds of problems as it's trying to catch up to this player. And then the friendly or ally hitbox becomes a little too close. And this needs to make a last minute adjustment in order to deliver that nape hit, which causes it to rapidly swing to the left. This is frame by frame. Remember this, nape hit happens, but that hand hitbox from the ally player is now a problem. And we get a bunch of wild snaps into another perfect nape hit on the ally. Now, slowed down, this doesn't look horrible, but when you speed this up, it's insane how quick this is happening. And you can even see the frame by frame tracking on the fighter as he's crumbling to the ground because the aim key is being pressed. It's insanely quick. So quick and very clear what happened here. So now let's introduce mobs. Mobs can also be a problem, a very big problem, similar to that hitbox on the Druid. We can have really strange interactions with mobs. And this is one example of this. So we're going to slow this down. We're going to see what happens. Once again, remember, player movement can seriously impact how smooth this whole process looks. So a longsword swing is initiated. Remember, it's predicting for player movement. It's also in tune with which weapon you're using and will try to swing accordingly. So it's trying to deliver a perfect stab nape region of this wizard. Wizard's going left or right. The program is doing everything possible to deliver that hit without missing. So what happens though is a nice little redirection by the wizard to just try and survive, which leaves the longsword a little short, and then an insane reaction has to happen, a one frame snap to deliver any hit at all, which also drags it into the hitbox of the goblin to then deliver a nice beautiful nape hit. And remember, this all happens insanely quickly. And to the naked eye, it just seems like a weird hiccup in something. Well, it is a weird hiccup. It's just the program having struggles with hitboxes and player movement. There's really no reason to swing at that mob there, and really, the wizard was the main target. Now, let's see what happens when attempting to block, because I think sometimes even when blocking, the hitboxes of mobs can become an issue, and you can see it quite clearly here. A block is initiated, trying to block the war maul on this barbarian or whatever it is, and for a few frames, it actually drags perfectly into the mob hitbox and starts predicting and adjusting frame by frame to the mob for just a few frames, which is quite interesting. As the mob goes to swing, his hitbox actually leaning towards the player, resulting in a couple frames of it dropping down. And then the war maul is no longer able to be blocked because the aimer is actually locked onto this mob. You can see there going back and forth with the frames. There's some weird interactions with mobs when blocking. I can only assume because maybe that's the aim key when you're using bows or frannies. So the hitboxes can become a problem, and with the tracking and all that stuff involved, it's a bit of an issue. When you're doing duos, trios, or 1v3s, whatever it may be, you can quite clearly see really bad interactions or situations that just are not explainable unless you are using a cheap program. So, for example, this is another one. We have trios or duos, whatever it may be, and it looks as if they're tracking the wizard, but the hitbox it actually locked onto was the fighter. When this originally was pressed, the lock-on key or the aim key, whatever it is actually is tracking the fighter perfectly to deliver a nape hit. Just a very awkward interaction, but we see once again a very clear point of contact where this thing's trying to get that reticle every time a throw or swing is initiated. So, let's talk a little bit more about what aim looks like, because some of you are probably saying, well, this could just be normal aim, but if you look at people that are good at this game, that I trust, the interactions between reticle and player are much different. For example, most times players will aim in front and then drag across with a smooth transition of their mouse. And this is done quite simply to increase the odds that the projectile and the player movement will line up nicely, even if you mistime your shot. Because there's a lot happening. It's very hard to predict these things and make small adjustments. For example, with Soapy, he gets in front of the player, raises his aimer, and then drags it across quite nicely. And we'll slow this down. Unfortunately for him, it was mistimed, but I've seen him hit these. But it's one fluid motion, no pulling to a defined region or snapping to an area, no pushing up or down for a couple frames to make sure that the target is locked onto the nape region, and no predicting player movement. The aimer is quite smooth, quite noticeably smooth. In his example, he plays on low DPI. So for high DPI, like in the Yami's situation, it can become a little bit chaotic, but it's still quite natural. He lands a nice 180, gets his aimer in a good spot, but then cuts across the opponent to try to get ahead of player movement. And none of this is frame by frame tracking, and there's no pull to a clear defined point. And as you can see, he cuts across with a fluid movement. He does cut across the nape region, but it does not lock, it does not pull, it does not go vertical. It is all very consistent. And you can watch other people do this. It never ever comes to a snap like this where it's trying to pick up steam to get to that region. And you'll see it quite clearly once I slow this down. A throw is initiated. Remember, this is a frame perfect adjustment to deliver a hit to the nape region. This is what I call the snap of death. It is basically the program trying to do everything possible to get where it needs to be. Boom, perfect lock on, couple frame adjustment, and then the pull away. It's quite an unnatural looking mouse motion when it's stopping mid progress to make frame perfect adjustments and then dragging down in a different direction. This is very unnatural and not something I see. And like I said before, the snaps happen because player movement makes this very difficult, which is why bows could become a problem. Because if you're using your aim lock and you're missing a lot with bow, it's going to be snapping at players a lot to try to make up the ground with the projectile speed and player movement. Like in this example, a throw is initiated. It starts pulling and tracking up towards the player, but it's running out of time. There's no cut across to get ahead of this player movement. It's almost too late. But it still needs to get there and does everything possible in the last couple frames to snap across and deliver a hit to the nape region. It just couldn't do it quite quick enough. Player movement, projectile distance, all those things are complicating it, making this weird snapping motion at the end to try to make up ground. And there's many, many examples of this. Some of them I showed in my past videos, but I didn't demonstrate them properly. Also, rat can become a problem. Small hitbox moving quite quickly, it can become a problem. And some of you may have seen examples like these somewhere around the internet. And I will get to these examples, but I just want to show you some of what we're looking for when it comes to melee first. So let's look at people that actually play this game and aim. Once again, it's quite clear what the goal is. And very often you can see the player reacting to the movement in front of them, obviously delayed, but they're reacting. He's trying to land a hit here, so he drags to the left to get that thrust attack in a good spot. It's actually very, very well done, and then pulls away at the last second, dragging that hitbox through the player and getting away from the stiletto hit, or at least attempting to, of the rogue. And then in the next instance, it's the same thing, but you see right here, his aimer is quite still because he is reacting to what's happening in front of him. There is no pull or tracking into the player or odd movements vertically or horizontally, frame by frame. He's now going to deliver a hit number 2, and I apologize, my internet was being super scuffed here, but this is frame by frame. He cuts across with his own movement, trying to get ahead of the rogue's movement and deliver an angled slash through the individual. So, he gets on the left-hand side. Once again, fluid mouse movement from left to right to deliver a slash. There's no stopping mid-swing to pull vertically or track the player nape accurately. It doesn't happen. There's no dragging into that nape region on every swing. That was quite a natural movement. Let's look at something not so natural. And these examples are everywhere when you start looking at melee. This thing loves to hit nape. And in this example, we have a pretty chaotic fight, which looks quite normal with someone with crazy high DPI or something, but when you slow it down, it becomes a little more obvious. We have a swing being initiated, and the program is doing everything possible to get this as smoothly as possible to that nape region. Remember, it does predict movement, as you're seeing, and swing patterns. So it will try and make adjustments based on the weapon swing. And right there, we get a readjustment, a very, very snappy readjustment into another odd movement. It's just honestly unexplainable, but the second swing is much more, in my opinion, easy to spot. This is when it becomes quite clear to me that there's just something pulling or tugging that reticle in a direction that's not natural. So we have a clear mouse movement from left to right. You can see it starting out of these rocks here. It starts pulling through the player, and then the player is coming towards the attacker. So at 3 frames adjustment, 1, there's a 2, and then 3 to get that nape hit, and then the mouse movement continues in a horizontal, and then once this aim lock's off, the mouse just goes wild again before trying to deliver a third hit. What happens in the third hit, even though it's tracking nape, the falchion actually gets too far away, so it has to readjust and deliver a hit. Once you're able to spot it, you see it a lot. But now let's get back to some of the rat examples I talked about earlier, as it appears rat can give it some problems. But if you look, once again, a throw is initiated, tracking is enabled, or the aim key is enabled, and there is a clear snap frame by frame at the exact time of the throw or hit, whatever it may be, to make up the ground and deliver a hit. Remember, it's supposed to do this smoothly, but it can't always. And there are going to be situations in Dark and Darker where you will be able to spot these things happening. It's not up to me to ban these people. I'm just showing you what I found. Perfect tracking, a little late, once again, on the adjustments, which results in a snap to the rat after the Franny is thrown. It just couldn't quite predict perfectly, but the snap is still there, followed by some nice tracking of this poor little rat. And it also becomes a serious problem when in melee rat form, because if you have a last minute or last second movement change, or the movement speed, on top of maybe a cumbersome weapon like Bardiche, which we're going to watch, this motion becomes quite difficult with the hitboxes in Dark and Darker, and the movement of the rat, with any directional change at all in the last couple frames, it will result in a pretty egregious snap. Like in this example, mouse is going left to right, and then there is a pretty clear jump in the pitch dark, frame perfect I might add, back to the left to kill this poor rat. And then the mouse continues to the right again. So the snap is happening because, well, the player movement of the rat was kind of unpredictable, and it had to make a last second adjustment. This is observable in other situations and other moments as well, but luckily for this little rat, he actually got away. But a swing was initiated, the aim lock is being applied, but the rat movement makes this very, very awkward, and the only reason why I think he survives here is because the weapon actually clangs off the floor. So the weapon clangs off the floor, and then you get a nice snap from the aimbot to try to make up ground with this unpredictable rat movement. And I think he would have died. You can quite clearly see it drags nicely through that rat, which is an insane movement. Very, very insane. And I feel bad for any of you rat people out there that get caught up in this. And lastly, here's more examples of other people making nice throws. So this is Repoze. This is an amazing throw, actually, because he's predicting player movement. He drags to the right, but readjusts because the fighter does not push that direction, and makes a small little adjustment to deliver a throw in a really, really good spot. However, he slightly mistimed it, so it didn't actually, wasn't a frame perfect snap into the nape, but he did cut across it in a very observable path with no snapping or insane acceleration or deceleration of his mouse. It was all quite controlled. There was also no observable tracking of the player movement as the attacker is pushing towards him. All look quite natural. I think that's enough examples for today. You can find these just about everywhere you look. I have found them in other places as well, which I won't share. But it's up to Iron Maze to try to figure out how they want to deal with this stuff. And if they don't, well, it is what it is. Sayonara as far as I'm concerned. Let me retire. I can go live peacefully and finish my last cut of silage. Anyway, enjoy yourselves. Please do not harass anybody. Don't go all crazy, psychotic on this whole thing. It is just a game at the end of the day. People cheat in every game. It happens. All right? I just thought this would be educational or informative in some way. You guys do what you gotta do with this information. I expect a bunch more criticism, whatever, harassment, hate. It is what it is. Enjoy Dark and Darker any way you can. I'll see you next time.